And so, there we go. Let's see. So tonight we're going to talk about steps 3 and 4, but I also want to talk a little bit about step 2 as well. And so in true AA fashion, I have chosen to talk about whatever I want to talk about. Yeah, like every good alcoholic, I just decided to go off topic. And so that being said, I'm going to share with you the only story that came, this is, for some reason in my head, I have to say some funny story at the beginning, and then it's an okay teaching. Whatever happens after that's okay. And so I wasn't going to do that this week, but then I was sitting there in my office today, just printing out the final draft of what I'm going to be talking about and things like that, and I was like, just share the Apple story. It's so funny to you. I don't know. Anyways, so I'm going to share the apple tree story, and it relates to step 4. When I first got sober back in 2013, in 2014, I did my first round of steps, and I did them in a program called Power. It's a workshop, a 12-step workshop. And some of you might have been part of RATS, which is the male version of Power. And so I was really, I was the type of sponsee in Power that I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I had no idea what was happening. I was just doing what they assigned me. They assigned me something, and I would do it. I had no questions about it. I basically had shown up in AA with very little adult skills and a lot of just open-mindedness, right? And so they're telling me, they're assigning our 4th step to us, and so they're telling us about these columns you're going to have to write and all this extra stuff that you're going to be doing. And I was like, okay. And now during that time, as many of us who come into AA, I had to ride a bike everywhere because I didn't have all the stuff like cars and licenses and things like that. And so I was on my bike. So after Power was over, I got on my bike, and I get really meditative when I'm on my bike. And so I'm riding home from the church that Power meets at. And the only thing I'm like, well, what kind of resentments could I put on this list? And the only thing that came to mind was the time my parents left me in an apple tree when I was 3 years old. That was it, right? and I was so I rode this whole 10-minute, 15-minute ride, and I'm like, how dare they leave me in an apple tree for 3 days? Because that's how it felt. Like it was 3 days there, and I was sitting in this apple tree, living, alone. I'm just no water, no food. I'm living off the apples. I'm trying to make a way of my life, And I'm thinking this the whole way home, and I get home, and I get into the house. I'm like, how dare you guys leave me in the apple tree for 6 months? And they're looking at me like, what apple tree? The apple tree on Hicks. Remember our Hicks Avenue house? And they're like, we didn't leave you in the apple tree. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe it was a fancy memory. Maybe it was an imagined memory. So I didn't put it on my 4th step, okay? So the apple tree was not there. But fast forward to a couple months ago, and can you put up that slide, Jenny? This very picture of me in the apple tree was discovered in my home in our family photo box. And my mom's like, here's a picture of you in that apple tree. And I'm like, I knew it. I was in the tree. That's little Emma looking sad because she's been there for 7 days, trying to live off the apples. And all I can see in that little girl's face is, man, that girl has made a decision to say, if I need to live in the outdoors, I can do it. And that is my apple tree story, so it's slightly funny, but it's a really cute picture. And firstly, that's me looking really disturbed about being in the apple tree. Secondly, that's the only picture that I look like my daughter in. So that's good. So now we're going to get into step 3. Again, like I said, the first time I did step 3 was at Power, and basically it was really powerful. We were in a room with 80 other women, and they asked us all to kneel down. And they gave us handouts that had the prayer, the step 3, the 3rd step prayer on it, and we all said the prayer together, and that moment stuck with me throughout all of my sobriety. And the story I want to share with you tonight is not my story of step 3 or anything like that, but it is actually a story you might recognize. It's told in 3 different Gospels in the Bible. And I heard it many times growing up, but it wasn't until I heard it as an addict in recovery that I began to see the parallels with the steps. So slide 1. All right, so we're going to read the story from the Bible. Mark 25:26, and And the woman it was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. So this woman knew that she was sick, and I too at one point knew that I was sick, right? And that I had admitted powerless over the disease of alcoholism, that my life had become unmanageable. It then says she suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and spent all she had. And back then, in the Bible times, being sick meant being an outcast or deemed unclean, so she was not accepted by society. For me, addiction, it caused me to feel like I was unclean, even if I was still being accepted by my family and friends at some level. You know, it made me feel like I was an outcast because I didn't feel like I could function inside regular society's norms, you know? And essentially, no human power could have relieved her from the sickness. Just like for most of us, no human power could have relieved us from our alcoholism. So when she heard about Jesus, so you see Jesus and his disciples had been traveling from town to town, teaching and sometimes performing miracles. Word was spreading about this great teacher, healer, and Messiah, and crowds would follow him everywhere. Our girl came to believe that Jesus could restore her to health. So in Matthew 9:21, it says, she said to herself, if only I touch the cloak, I will be healed. In Mark 5:28, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I would be healed. And so then she made the decision to touch the cloak. So when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. And in Luke 8:44, she came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately the bleeding stopped. She touched the cloak, and immediately she was healed. She made the decision to touch the cloak, and she believed a power greater than herself could restore her, and she made the decision to turn her will and her life over to the care of God. And she touched the cloak, right? So let's pause our story and talk about the third step. Step 3 is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And what is this step about? Step 3 is a decision, not an outcome. This step does not require confidence, certainty, emotional readiness. It requires willingness to change direction. Step 1 established that self-management failed. Step 2 established that self-thinking could not restore sanity. And step 3 addresses the remaining problem, who's in charge. This step asks that whether you are willing to stop directing your life by self-will and allow care and guidance to come from something greater than yourself. So step 3 is not about feelings, it's about authority, right? What does turning it over mean? Turning it over does not mean giving up responsibility, withdrawing from action, or becoming passive or inactive. Turning it over does mean no longer running life on self-will, misdirected pride, no longer insisting on personal control, but ready to trust God, allowing his care and guidance and direction to replace my self-direction. This step is the end of playing God. Step 3 is complete when you have made a decision to stop directing your life by self-will and rely on God's care instead. This decision is made once, but practiced daily. So I constantly say the third step prayer in the morning. That's part of my morning prayers because I always have to be surrendered. I always have to turn it over, right? Because the moment I don't, I suddenly think that I'm in charge. And when I think that I'm in charge, we're all doing it on time frame, and so God needs to know that I need that solved by 2 p.m. on Tuesday, because that's how it is for me, right? But when I turn it over and when I surrender each day, my life becomes really easy because then I'm doing God's will and not mine. And that's where I want to live, in that zone. And so the decision, once made, is practiced daily. You may feel different immediately, and you will begin to act differently. So let's get back to our story, though. Mark 5:30 through 31. At once Jesus realized power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and he's like, "Who touched my cloak? You see the people crowding against you," the disciples answered, "and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And so again in Luke 8:45 through 46, "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. And this is the good one because Peter's just kind of sassy. He's like, when they all denied it, Peter was like, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, and I know the power had gone out from me." Literally, the disciples were like, "Dude, we're in this huge crowd. People are touching you all over. Like, what do you mean who touched your clothes? Like, this is crazy, right?" the next slide is, but Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet. Trembling with fear, she told him the whole truth. She told the whole truth. She became honest, even though she was frightened, which leads us to step 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 4 is a fact-finding, fact-facing process. Step 4 is not about self-improvement. It's about the truth, right? This step does not ask you to judge yourself, fix yourself, or explain yourself. It asks you to see clearly what has been driving your actions, reactions, and decisions. Step 1 through 3 remove denial, restored willingness, and changed directions. Step 4 identifies what must be removed for that direction to be lived out. This step exists because unresolved resentment, fear, and selfishness block spiritual growth and return us to free will. This inventory is written, honest, thorough, fact-based. This inventory is not a confession, a punishment, a moral ranking, or a life story. Thoroughness and honesty are what matters, not perfection. Real or fancy, we write it down. If it's sad, heavy, upsetting, frustrating, scary, unclear, we write it down. We write down everything. My first 4th step was done during my first year of sobriety, and I was unsure how to do one, and there were things I didn't want to relive. I was given directions through the Big Book and through my sponsor at the time, and all the instructions were basically just to keep it simple. Follow the list and guides in chapter 5, how it works. That's how I learned how to do it. One of the difficult things I wrote on my 4th step was about domestic abuse. When I was arrested in 2013, I had 2 black eyes in different stages of healing. I had a cut right here between my eyes where I had been headbutted earlier that week because I came home later than he expected me to. And looking back, the months of abuse I endured were a huge part of what got me sober that day, When it came to writing my 4th step, I wrote down the name of my abuser in the first column, and then a simple sentence about what he did in the second column. And then in the column about my part, I didn't know what to put. So I asked my sponsor, and she suggested that my part was that I stayed. And that truth hit me really hard, right? Now, if abuse is in your story, because this is not the only abuser that was on my list during my first 4th step, but in some of the times when I got to that part was not my part. There was nothing, it was not me. I did not bring that abuse upon myself. But if abuse is in your story and you write it on your 4th step, no matter what, and if you need to know what and if you need to know, or if you get to that column, you can always write nothing. You could always write nothing was not applicable. Because if you're a victim of child abuse or even as an adult abuse, you did nothing to deserve that. And the more you can remember that makes your step 4 go way easier for everything. And just remember that it helps you forgive yourself, basically. I was able to forgive myself for staying in that situation really easily. And every other situation that I had put myself in those over the years that I was out there using drugs and alcohol, it was easy for me to then say, that wasn't my fault. You know what I mean? I did not bring that on me. And so if you have any questions about writing your 4th step, I'm not going to stay too long on the 4th step part, but if you have any questions, please ask your sponsor. And if you have anything you are concerned about or whatever, you can also ask any of us leaders or volunteers here, because we can help you. We want to make sure that you have a safe space to address what is going on with that stuff, because it's a daunting task if you start reliving it. But if you keep it simple, it really makes the total difference. Okay, so now let's get back to our girl in our story. In Matthew 9:22, Jesus turned and saw her. "Take heart, daughter," he said, "your faith has healed you." And the woman was healed at that moment. He said in Mark 5:34, he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." In Luke 8:48, then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Jesus addressed this woman who was cast out and called unclean as daughter, as part of a family, as a family member. We are all sons and daughters of God, made in his image, saved by his blood, given grace, mercy, acceptance, love, no matter what. All it took was a decision to touch the cloak and faith in God to restore your sanity. Tonight, if you've made a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God, come get a surrender cross, because that's what we do here, right? If you've made a decision to make Jesus your Lord and Savior, I encourage you to come get a surrender cross and make that known to us. And if you just want to surrender just for today, then that's what surrender crosses are also for. Come get a surrender cross. We would love to give you a hug and congratulate you today. And if you want someone to help you understand what asking Jesus to be your Savior is, please stick around afterwards and talk to me, or talk to Lily, or talk to any of the RC leaders or any of these volunteers, because we would love to help you understand how to deepen your relationship with God. So right now, we're going to close with the third step prayer, which will be up on the screen. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help, of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life, and may I do thy will always. In Luke 22:42, not my will, but yours be done. Thank you for having me, and I'd love to stand up here and give hugs for surrender crosses.
Good evening, Recovery Church. Well, I don't have to give the whole deal on how to come get a recovery cross, because I just think Emma did a great job with that. So, I'm going to give out recovery crosses here, surrender crosses from Recovery Church. If you want